So, first of all, I've been sitting listening in case you've been wondering why I've been up on the screen. I've just been listening to people sharing what they've experienced over the last number of years. And Angela asked me deliberately to just sit and listen. So, many of you don't know who I am. So, let me just start briefly by saying I'm Angela's friend. I know Jill, I know a few other people. I had the great pleasure actually of learning with about five or six of the people in the room. We spent about 8 weeks together talking about community and the importance of community. So my job that Angela and Jill gave me this morning, and the folks that we did the training together with have asked me, is a listening job. So what I'm going to do really is just tell you what I think I heard in the best way I know how. And part of what I suppose I do around the world is I have this unbelievable job that allows me to be invited into communities and I think try to really make visible the power and the importance, not just in local communities, but for the world when it comes to thinking this way, when it comes to being this way, when it comes to taking a community first approach. And I think what we're hearing this morning has the power to really, really change everything in the world as we know it and resolve an awful lot of the problems the world is facing right now. So it may seem like what we're talking about is very local and very modest, and it is, and so it should be. It's also incredibly important and has, I suppose, to talk about rippling, it has the effect of rippling outwards. One of the things I think we're hearing this morning is the importance of listening and listening really carefully, but listening to people who live in communities and make sure that we're listening to them because how they understand and how they prioritize what's going on and what should be addressed, that's what matters. You always know you're in a room with powerful people when they're working together with other people that they live with to define the problem in their own language. So the stories that we heard, like the stories of young people being trusted, and why wouldn't you trust them? They've already started to try to contribute to their own community. So they're not just leaders of tomorrow, they're leaders of today. They're not at risk, they're at promise, and they're sharing their power and their promise with their communities. And this is really, really powerful. I think as I listened to that story, what I heard were young people who were acting like citizens, were acting like contributors, and were reminding us again, if it takes a village to raise a child, well, in those stories where we're hearing about young people raising our village and contributing to our village, not just being needy, but being needed. So, one of the questions that Angela was asking us to think about this morning is not just how we can make sure that neighbors are getting together, including young people, including people from the margins, including people of all backgrounds, and saying really that everybody's contribution matters. That was one part of what she was asking us to listen to and really hear the power of people who didn't even know each other, lived in the same neighborhood for 20 years, but didn't have the opportunity to actually connect with each other because there was nowhere in their community they could bump into each other. And then the play created a space where people could gather together, laugh together, problem solve together, play together, grow together, be together, and then change their community together. That's the nursery of democracy. One of the reasons that we have so much division in our communities is not because people are bad or mad or sad, but because they haven't the opportunity to get together, to live the good, the bad, and the indifferent and work it through. The arguments in the morning, the laughter in the afternoon, the not letting the sunset come down on our anger, all of that stuff. And the power of actually recognizing that somehow baked into the way the system works is the other thing that Angela asked us to think about. What is it that our institutions are doing to get alongside and really listen to the wisdom of communities instead of thinking they're bringing well-being to our communities, how can we help our institutions understand you're joining well-being in the community? You don't bring health or child welfare to the community. You join the community in that endeavor. And so I think that's the first principle that I heard. Listen carefully to the problems, the definitions, the solutions put forward by citizens, and make sure it's all citizens. Young people don't have to wait till they have a vote at 18. To be a citizen is to be a contributor to your community. A child, a baby can do that. Everybody can do that. All means all. So that's the first principle. Listen carefully to how people living in the communities are defining the priorities. That's number one. The second thing I heard was, if you're an outside actor, like we heard Chris's name, and it would be great to hear Chris's reflections at some point. We heard Chris's name, but I'm sure there are other people as well who are really good at getting alongside the community. And we've heard that word alongside a lot. And basically, that means somebody who isn't directing the conversation, telling the community where they should go, what they should do, how they should do it. Or worse yet, taking children away from members of the community who are economically marginalized and bringing them off to do activities away from the neighborhood. What I heard was that people were saying, hang on a second here, give us the space to convene in our local communities, including our young people, and let us plan our action. Let us actually use our ideas to do the action. And you just cheer us on. Give us some resource if we need it, but trust us. This word trust came up again and again. So that's the second thing. If you're an outsider and you want to be useful, get alongside communities, but in a way that's about being on tap, not on top. Trust them. Say, no, you're in the driving seat. I'm here to serve you. And I'll help you get convened, get organized, because maybe you don't know your neighbors. Maybe you haven't spoken to people for 20 years. Maybe there hasn't been a way to do that. Well, part of my job is to create the conditions, the processes, so that you can do that. So that second principle, the first is listen. The second is convene, not so you get community to do what you want them to do, but so that community can be together to figure out what they want to do, right? Cheer them on, resource them if necessary. The third principle I heard this morning is a principle of offering to supply support for residents to take their own initiatives. So rather than assuming the council or the NHS trust or the mental health trust or, whatever it might be, a housing provider, or even the third sector is the primary problem solver, what we're hearing this morning is no, you've got to assume if you're an outside agency working in any of these neighborhoods, you've got to assume the community is the primary problem solver, but they may not have been enabled to become a community yet. There may be work to be done on including the voice of young people, on creating the conditions where people can playfully come up with ideas and make mischief and figure things out. And sometimes that will be about trying things out, maybe them not working, maybe some people coming along, and they may have become used to thinking, well, I just come along because they have a story maybe in their heads that says, well, things will only get better for me and my family if somebody from outside comes in to make them better. So in the very early days then, when communities start creating projects, sometimes what happens is some members of our community, because they're used to that story, think that the leaders in our community are kind of like service providers. So they come and they're not quite sure, like, well, can I do this? Can I be involved? What's my role? So I think what I loved about the stories as well is that there were stories about how people were sharing authority and sharing power with their neighbors, as well as stories about how those agencies were kind of trying to be of service, to support. So we're talking about listening, convening, and then offering to supply support, but not to get people to do what we want them to do, but to give them the power and the resource to do it themselves. The fourth principle I heard this morning is recognize residents as official actors. Okay. Sometimes because, of trauma or because of maybe bad experiences in the past, sometimes communities can start challenging their leaders. Who are you to set up that group? Who do you think you are telling us what to do? All of that kind of stuff can happen. And that's just, it's a bit like, I see it even in my own family at Christmas. There's certain people who come, we have kind of Christmas dinner or whatever together, and you're dreading it for weeks beforehand because they're tricky. But that's life. That's kind of part of family, and community is the same. So there are tricky parts. So sometimes what you need kind of a bit of backup to say, look, you know, these folks they're operating with the support of the wider community, and they're kind of doing something with a bit of a cheerleading role that's taken on by agencies. We trust these folks. They're not just going off on one. They're actually doing something that the community is behind and different players are behind. So just the final thought I had, and I'm kind of keen to go back to listening after that, is I think it's really important, having said that, of course, community should be in the lead. It's also really important to say this is not about saying, therefore, institutions are off the hook. They have no role. They do have a role. It's really important that institutions take on and take full responsibility for institutional tasks. All we're hearing this morning is that there are also tasks that are best done in community. So that kind of idea that there's certain things that are best done by community, let's remove the barriers to participation and cheer them on and give them the resource they need. It doesn't take a lot of money. 200 quid sets up 4 groups. When's the last time you saw an institution use 200 quid and actually get an outcome? Think about it. But we also have to recognize that sometimes institutions need to come alongside communities, that there's things they have to do together, but where the institution is recognizing the community in the lead. And finally, there are things that are left for institutions to do. So I think it's really, really important to recognize that it's not either or, it's both and. But putting the community first, that's what we heard this morning, because that creates ownership. That creates sustainability. And at the end of the day, the one thing you cannot provide if you're a service provider in the room, the one thing you cannot give anybody is community. Only the people who live in community can create community. That's their journey to take. But what we can do is we can create the conditions, we can create some resources, and we can trust each other. Everything we've heard so far has moved at the speed of trust. So thank you all very much for allowing me to be an eavesdropper or a fly on the wall on this fantastic morning of celebration. And congratulations. Stay in trouble. Thank you.